This is Olbermann versus Trump, and I'm not Trump. I've not said much in this series about the president-elect, but on the happy presumption that he takes office as scheduled, he will be the 6th president I have met. I do not claim to have known any of them well, but the experience with this one will be, for me, unique, and I think the story of it will be useful to you. Early in 2007, I got a call from one of his staffers. The senator would like to take me to lunch the next time he's in New York. He needs my advice. Would I be interested? My first reaction was to ask if they had called the wrong number. My next was to make sure this wasn't some sort of policy question, because as a news anchor and commentator for MSNBC, it did not seem appropriate for me to offer advice to a candidate for his party's presidential nomination, and doesn't that seem quaint these days? I also noted that the odds that I actually had any policy advice to give to Senator Biden were decidedly against. No, I was told it was more technical, more about communications. My antique standards satisfied, I said yes. They gave me a couple of dates, and they suggested, given his schedule, the best place to eat would be a restaurant in Manhattan that happened to be about 45 seconds from my home. So the day and the hour arrived, and I made it to the restaurant, sat down, and a moment later in bounded the senator from Delaware. He had the big welcoming smile and equally big welcoming handshake that you may have seen from back when candidates could still go greet the people in the crowd. He reminded me that we'd met briefly when he was in Los Angeles for the 2000 Democratic Convention and happened to be staying in the hotel there in which I lived. Senator Biden then said some nice things about my days in sports, and particularly about the commentaries I'd begun to do the previous summer on MSNBC. Those special comments, he said, first with a smile and then a whistle. There was then, and there remains now, almost no space between the public Joe Biden of the campaign or the president-elect speech and that guy who talks informally to some knucklehead off the streets, which in this story would be me. The word malarkey was used during our lunch, and I remember this specifically because, as I told him then, I went to grammar school with a kid named Malarkey, and he was delighted by that, and he said he assumed we gave the fellow a hard time, and I said, yeah, but not because of the name. None of us third graders knew what it meant. Why'd you give him a hard time then, Biden asked. It was the third grade. I said everybody gave everybody a hard time. He liked that answer. But back to the point of the lunch. Your language in these special comments, he said. People often brought up the language. I used to tell President Bush to shut the hell up. And some of the events of that presidency so infuriated me that I would redden on camera, and I don't redden in a sauna. Once, my high school history teacher, a distinguished and elegant man whose 9 older siblings were born in Vienna and who had the courtliness and dignity which that implies, mentioned the language of the special comments, and I thought I was in for it. He, Walter Schneller, told me on the day I graduated that my plans to be a sportscaster were all very nice, and he was sure I would go and do that, but that he was also sure that I would wind up in politics someday, either as reporter or combatant, and I told him I was flattered, but that he was crazy. Mr. Schneller was the one who years later was put in charge of the school's surprisingly generous budget for bringing in speakers to address the student body. He was very annoyed by the fact that for decades all of these speakers had either looked like Hugh Sidey, the columnist for Time magazine, or they had been Hugh Sidey, the columnist for Time magazine. He began scouring the Northeast for anybody smart who might have a diverse background. That's how he happened to be driving to the railroad station at Tarrytown, New York one morning in 1991 to meet a train that carried that day's guest speaker, an editor of the Harvard Law Review named Barack Obama. Mr. Schneller and I were talking about the commentaries, and he said, about the language, and I braced myself and preemptively apologized. No, he said urgently, you missed my point entirely. I'm amazed that your language is so restrained. If I were speaking, I'd have called Mr. Bush, And thereupon Mr. Schneller made reference to somebody's mother. So, when Joe Biden asked about the language I used, I was a little wary, but he followed it up by saying that it was kind of why he had asked me to lunch. I watch the commentaries that you do. People send me the video. My staffers tell me about them. Every time I think the same thing. You express anger, but as close as it comes to that line, you never cross that line. I say to myself, folks, is he too angry for you? And they all say, no, just right. So here's my question. Then we can enjoy this great lunch here. When I am passionate about something, the senator said, and I speak on the Senate floor or somewhere else, I get told by my friends and my enemies, you're too angry. And when I really am angry, they all say, you're really too angry. And here Joe Biden laughed. Now you You go on TV, it's far larger audience, far longer speeches, and people say, that Olbermann, he's righteously indignant. With a mixture of laughter, astonishment, and curiosity, he then said, me, I'm angry. You're righteously indignant. How do you do it? How do you do it, man? Can you tell me? Without thinking, I replied, you've been in the Senate for how long now, Senator? 34 years? He nodded yes. And you're only just asking this question now? And the words were barely out of my mouth when I froze. This wasn't a friend or a colleague who would take the little joking jab that I'd just thrown. This was a politician. They may have senses of humor, but very few of them have a sense of humor about themselves. In that split second, I thought Joe Biden might get up and leave the restaurant. And he was silent for a moment, and then the corners of his mouth turned up, and to my great relief, he burst into laughter. He rocked back into his chair. He slapped the table with a palm. My God, that's funny, he said. More laughter. And then, my God, that's true. Louder laughter. I have loved him ever since. I didn't think I had much advice for him, practically speaking, but as we talked about this topic, he asked me follow-up question after follow-up question that made me analyze for the first time some of the processes I used when writing and reading on television. I'd never thought of them before because I had never had lunch with Joe Biden before. And in the nearly 14 years since then, I have often told this story and sometimes been told something like, that's so him. Both the laughter and the analysis by question. He got more out of me than I thought I knew about the subject. That's so him too. I suspect it will make him a great president. We spoke for about an hour before he had to go. A lot about baseball, a lot about education and educators, from my Mr. Schneller to his teachers and his wife, the English teacher. I will not bore you with the full results of the dissection of the process of turning anger into righteous indignation. The most valuable conclusion was the oldest one in the book. I always wrote late at night while fully angry, and then in the morning I would start taking stuff out, usually adjectives. Whatever anger was left was only the most intense and the most justifiable. And if you present it 24 hours after you write it, you will be in control of the anger and not have the anger in control of you. In short, as they say, sleep on it. I saw the senator next in August of 2007. This is a photo from that day. It's a Democratic primary debate, the AFL-CIO Candidates Forum officially. Soldier Field, Chicago, outdoors, 95 degrees, threat of thunderstorms. Obama, Clinton, Biden, Dodd, Richardson, Kucinich, Edwards, and the moderator, me. The president-elect here is literally asking me if I have noticed that he's been trying to turn his anger into righteous indignation, and he's asking me if I think he's succeeded. And actually, I think he has. He didn't in that debate, though. And he actually came over to me during a commercial and told me what he was going to do, and I told him don't do it, and he did it anyway, and later he let me know, yeah, I was right. Since then, I cannot recall him being angry, not even in those debates with that goddamn madman. His words were harsh, his tone was less so. Perfect. A+. And man, do we need that. I have one other thing to mention about him here. One of those quirks of history that give you chills, like the photo of George H.W. Bush as a Yale baseball player meeting Babe Ruth, or Bill Clinton as a kid meeting John Kennedy, or Barack Obama speaking at my high school 18 years before he became president. Or this photo that the Biden campaign research director tweeted last week. It's from the annual congressional baseball game of 1975. All the senators and congressmen got uniforms from the major league team closest to their home. So that's Joe Biden, center fielder for the Democrats, in a 1975 Philadelphia Phillies uniform, and look what number they gave him. 46. 46? As in the 46th president? And the photo was taken 45 years ago? Wow. Oh yeah, it turned out the Democrats won that game 3-2, ended an 11-game losing streak to the Republicans. Foreshadowing? Nah, probably just a bunch of malarkey. Good night and good luck.